Hey guys, it's Paul Bloch, Director of Maintenance at Thunderbird Aviation, and this is our monthly seminars that we do. Thanks for showing up, and just give you a little idea what we're going to be doing and talking about today, and that is landing gear. And what can we do as a pilot as far as inspecting and taking a look at our landing gear? A lot of times we can look at the condition of the tires, the wheel, air pressure, but also we can also take a look at different attachment points on our landing gear. So one thing we'd like to do is look at the different types of landing gear that you have. For instance, so like on a Cessna, it's the Cessna, on 172s, not obviously the retract ones, but they have a shroud over here, and there's just a pipe spring steel, either a flat bar or a round tubular spring steel structure as far as what's taking the weight of the airplane. And one of the things on the ones that are tubular, you'll notice is there's a lot of shrouding on there, and that just keeps them aerodynamic. Well, that's always a good place to take a look and see. I mean, you got your step right here. Sometimes people miss the step, and they'll step on the actual shroud. And these are really just aerodynamic, very thin, not meant to have a whole lot of just the air pressure on there to keep it streamlined. It's a streamlined fairing, but you don't want it flopping around. You don't want it breaking, so you have to take a look at it where it's attached to the strut, and take a look underneath. There's screws that hold on. These can be taken off, repaired, replaced. So what you're looking for, they also protect, if you look in here, and something to look at here is you have the brake lines coming up on the Cessnas that run right behind the actual tube. And so they're kind of protecting that line there. So, somebody steps on it, or if these are vibrating around too much, I've seen it where they cut into your brake line, and you get a bunch of fluid there, and then your brakes don't work on that side. So it's a good idea just to periodically look at that, just see how things are looking. The other thing is, let's come over here with my camera operator, Peter, if we can get in here. Without wheel pants on, these are really easy to look at. Here's your brake caliper. You can look at your brake linings. Look at all the fittings. Just see if there's any goo or any hydraulic fluid coming off of it. If it is, then that needs to be attended to. This line coming off is the pressure line that actually actuates the caliper. And a lot of times, just because of vibration, these things can start to crack. So you'll see some weeping. And a lot of times, you can catch something before you lose your brakes completely, and that's always very positive thing to be doing. So just when you're doing your pre-flight, or every so often, maybe do an extensive pre-flight. I mean, maybe you want to just take your fairing off and take a look and see if it's chafing anywhere on the inside. Just a few screws here and there on the backside, you can peek in there. And that's not a bad thing to do once in a while. If you see anything, if it's moving around a little bit too much, then it could be chafing on those lines. So that's kind of looking at either a spring steel. That's our compressor drain. It keeps the moisture out of the tank. It goes off every 45 minutes. So I mean, either the spring steel ones are not going to generally have a fairing on them, so you can see those lines and anything else along in that area. Some of them do, but most of them are just a flat steel on the spring steel. The tubular one is the ones that you'll see faired out. And also look into the plastic fairing where it goes into the fuselage. Sometimes that'll chafe into or start cracking here, and you know, just give it a. These things are flexing up and down quite a bit depending on the landing modes and stuff. So you watch them; they dance around a little bit. So good thing to look at when you do a pre-flight. You know, and it's do a brief check over, but maybe do a really thorough Saturday morning and just say, you know what, I'm going to go take a look at those landing gear really really well. Take a couple hours and do that. Doesn't hurt. And then the other thing is, look at the condition of your wheel. Is there any corrosion? Make sure, check your tire pressures. Look at the side walls on your tires. See if there's any checking on them. See how the tire is wearing. Now, there's not as much adjustment that you can do on a Cessna, but like on some of the Pipers and some of the landing gear that have a trailing link on them, we'll talk about that in a little bit, where you can actually do some adjustment. Just see how your tire's wearing. Look for flat spots. If there's a time you want to check the bearings, pull the tire off and actually look and repack the bearings. It's great when you do your big inspection on there. If you've changed your tires and it's not been long, and it's fine to do it every annual. Have your mechanic do it in every annual. But if you're going to do a little preventative maintenance on your own and you want to check it, good time to do it if you've jacked it up and you're going to look at the whole fairing and the whole landing gear leg. I don't know. Some people are flying more than 100 hours, and I think that it's not a bad idea to check your bearings, or if you hear anything or feel anything rough when you're landing, just to do it, maybe before an annual inspection. It's just kind of one of these things. The more you look, the more you get involved, and the more you question on something, the better off you are. It's safer. I mean, we think preventative maintenance is really better than post maintenance when something went wrong. Like I said, let's just take a look at some of the tires. Here's a nose tire. Somebody side loaded pretty good on that. Usually nose tires don't wear out too quickly. But also, if you look in the grooves here, this is starting to get weather checked also. So some good tread left, but now with these scuffs and those little cracks in there, it's time to change this tire out. So that's why it's on my bench, where I'm gonna, I don't want this on an airplane anymore, so I pulled it off and I'll be changing it. Here at Thunderbird, with the flight school, I always keep spares. I have a few spares on nose tires for a Piper, mains for a Cessna, mains for a Piper, and keep them on the shelf ready to go, because if somebody has a problem, we can just go out there and change that tire. If it's, if it goes flat on the ramp, or it goes flat out on the runway or something, if somebody has a, bad landing or something, then we can just change it out. We can drive it out there, lift it up, and have that tire changed in 5 minutes, versus trying to tow the airplane back and get it on a dolly and move it. That's really easy place to damage an airplane. So we always have a spare made up, just for our purposes, because it's flight school. Our stuff gets beat up quite a bit. Student pilots, exactly. So here's an indication of a tire that really did a pretty good job making it all the way throughout its life here. This one pretty much wore out. No flat spots, nothing major. So did pretty good. You'll notice also on some air, the way the landing gear sits in there. On a Piper, if you look, they try to straighten out the dihedral, and we'll go back to the Piper sitting there. Try to straighten out the dihedral, but they still do sit a little bit harder on the inside. So what we'll do is, and this one has been done once, we'll disassemble the wheel, rotate the tire around, and get the, when it starts wearing here, midlife on the tire, rotate the tire around. So now we have the new tread on the inside, so you can get them pretty even and pretty flat. It's still going to wear more on the inside on the Piper, but that does help it. In you know, midlife, if we can get it without any flat spots, we'll do a rotation. This one obviously, you know, is smooth and worn down evenly as this one is. This one made it to its full expected life. So, and that's great. But yeah, rotating in these is a much more important. Cessnas, they tend to wear pretty evenly. And you can just look, if it is a problem and you notice that yours is not wearing real evenly on your aircraft, then say, you know what, looks like the outside has hardly anywhere, then that's the time where we can do switch the tire around. We've done that at one of the maintenance seminars, going and splitting the wheel and changing your tire. And it's on the preventative maintenance, something that a pilot can do. And I don't know if we'll get to it today. If we have time, we'll do a quick tire change. But right now we just want to look at landing gear and you know, inspection of it and just seeing how it is. This here is a nose strut on a Cherokee. This portion here normally is hidden inside the motor mount. The rest of this is what you'll usually see sticking down below. Here's the chrome portion. Here's the trailing link here. Here's the stop block there. The fork, this happens to be off an Archer, so it's a 6-inch fork, or accommodates a 6-inch tire. And here's a new tire that I just put on this rim. So, and rebuilt this strut. It's all filled up with nitrogen, but you have 5606 hydraulic fluid and nitrogen for the pressure in this. If you look at the top, this is the Schrader valve right here, which you'll see inside the top of, well, like where the steering horn mechanism bolts onto it. This is where we're normally changing the fluid. We'll pull the stem out and attach a hose to it. And I'll explain that, servicing that in a little bit, but this is what we're kind of looking at, and I'll show you hopefully inside the airplane we can get a good picture on it. But that's where the nitrogen and the hydraulic fluid go in. Right now you'll see a valve stem in there, and that valve stem is just like a bike tire, typical Schrader valve bike tire stem. They're made a little bit higher pressure for these, but basically it's the same idea, same concept. And then always put our dust cap over there, and that also has the dust, you know, the dust cap on these. Unlike a lot of ones from your car, which are cheap and plastic, they have a nice little rubber O-ring. I don't know if you can see that in there. That's kind of an added feature to, in case you have a little bit of a leak, that actually has a sealing property to it too. You know, put that down there and you can feel that seal, that rubber seal actually bites on the top of the Schrader valve. So, but let's take a look at, this is what that strut goes into. Here's newly overhauled, just got this back from the repair shop. This is overhauled. We had periodically, because of being in a flight school, and personally, I just sent mine in. You know, it's 45-year-old motor mount, and nobody's ever really looked at it. I don't have a lot of high time on the airframe, but you just don't know. I mean, I got 4,000 hours on my airframe, but I'm like, you know, it's peeling, it's chipping, there's some rust on it. And I went in and had mine gone through, and they overhauled it. I'll paint it up with a nice epoxy coat on there. But I want to show you this. This is really part of the landing gear on a Cherokee. And on some Cessnas, you'll see the same thing. Right here is where that center portion slides in. I'll try to. There's no bearings in this one yet, so I can't really. This. Where that makes like that, And this top portion is what I was telling you, is what you see when you look in back in the engine compartment. We'll look later. And then there'll be this little thing that looks like kind of a big metal bow tie. That's your steering horn. And that's what connects up your steering. The whole thing swivels like this. And then that ties into your rudder pedals, your rudder cables from that point. But so if you look at it, this is a landing gear component. So is this. If someone has a hard landing or it's hard to nose wheel and were to do any damage to it, really take a look at the engine mount periodically. If you have your cowling off or you're looking in there, just clean it off and just see if you see anything. See if you see a bent tube or if you see any crack. We do these in, we like either a white or a red. We do the red for the Thunderbird because you can see, I personally on my airplane red is not suitable, but they usually come black. Black hides grease and it hides cracks and imperfections. So I personally, if you ever have your mechanic go off and say, I want when my motor mount needs some work on it, suggest don't go black with them. You can see a lot of things in a lighter color. If something were to go wrong, you would see it in these joints. There's a lot of welds, a lot of joints. And obviously this is the area where your engine attaches to it. It's hanging, everything's hanging on here. Your front nose gear, landing gear, that's all working. This is taking the whole load of everything. And then you'll see on the back side, we have on the Piper here, 5 attach points where the bolts go into the firewall. And there's some heavy duty metal brackets and things that these attach to the firewall. You'll see a lot of times you'll say, boy, the firewall doesn't seem that strong. That's just a covering over the firewall. In most airplanes, it's stainless steel. Piper uses galvanized metal, but that's just a sheeting over there. Behind there is the structural attach points, but the sheeting there keeps the separation from potential fire situation or air coming through, and protects the cabin from the engine compartment. But yeah, sometimes you'll say, I tap on it and it seems hollow, or I've put screws and bolts, things bolt through it. It's like, yeah, it is. You're just going through the thin metal covering over it. The structure is in where those attachment points are, and they're tied in with the rest of the airframe. If you look in there, there's usually some pretty good size, steel brackets tied in together with some of the aluminum structure. But the actual firewall material, see either galvanized or in stainless, generally speaking, stainless is a thinner sheet of aluminum or stainless, usually not more than 40 thousandths thick, probably 35, 32 thousandths, somewhere in there. But remember that metal back there is another thing. When we look over this, if we're going to look over our landing gear, it's not a bad idea to take a look and see if there's been a screw missing or somebody moved something around, or look at where the cables go through the firewall to put some high temperature RTV just in case, so you keep that sealed up, you don't have air leaking in there. And if there was ever a problem firewall forward, there was a fire there, that stuff can't, smoke and the other things can't go through the firewall very quickly and very readily. It gives you time to get down and land safely. So we can show, basically, I don't know if we can get, let me just pull this out of you real quick. I can show you kind of the firewall. If do you think we can sneak back behind? Let me move. Maybe go back a little bit and see if we can sneak back. Sneak back to 030 back there. Get a shot. Right, so this is a Cherokee firewall. Here's the galvanized, and you see it's just thin metal. There's a few things riveted on, a little support. But here, big riveted brackets in there. That's one of the engine supports on the top. Here's one on the bottom. You see there's a lot of stuff. There's a big metal plate. There's a big thing on the bottom there. So this is just kind of hollow area protecting. You know, there is a little bit of structure, but not a whole lot. That's just protecting the cabin from the firewall area. And as you see, I mean, we have, you know, tubes and hoses and wires and things going through here, and you want to make sure that they're sealed up. And if you see you know, that screw that somebody had to put in, or had drilled something and something maybe got pulled out, you know, it's not a bad idea to put a little, go down and grab a little high temperature RTV, the red stuff, and just put a little dab right there and seal that up. But here's the other side of an attach point here. So on that one, we got 1, 2 on the bottom and 3 on the top. So you can see how that motor mount will attach through there. And here, I'll have to paint this one up. This is where that strut comes up, and the valve, you can get to the valve to do any servicing and different things while it's on the airplane. So it kind of looks like a little metal bow tie. It's usually how the Piper configurations are very similar like that. And yeah, so that basically, an air motor mount like that gets bolted on there, and then you start building everything up from there, putting your front tire on and hooking everything up, putting your engine on. Kind of a simple design, but it's very, very efficient, works very well. So so you can see, let's go over here. This one's starting to get, somebody had a flat spot on that. No cord showing, so that's still okay. But as you see, you know, you do that flat spot. I mean, this is a pretty darn new tire, pretty good grooves there. That's that's flat spotted enough that there's no tire groove left. That's yeah. And then the other thing is, we can take a look here and there again. Always check whenever you're looking at things over. Look at your brake pads, brake pad thicknesses. I think Cleveland usually says 100 thousandths in thickness is a minimum. Boy, I tell you, brake pads are cheap, so you know, a lot of times I like to err on the side of, if you're riding your brakes, or certain airplanes have castering nose wheel. We got a Cirrus right out here. The Cirrus here, that nose wheel is all castering. There's no linkages hooked up to it. So as you're taxiing, all those steering tendencies and key factors are going to want to pull the plane in one direction. And then you have to use the brakes in order to keep differential until you get your rudder effect, you know, taxiing on. You see a lot of Cirrus pilots that they actually do taxi a little faster, and that's because they don't want to ride their brakes because they can burn their brakes up quickly. They want to get that rudder effect. So. And open up the other side to get some light in here. So if you can get in there and show, this one is black. We haven't gone through and changed that to red yet. It will be red. Because, you know, I really like being able to see stuff more readily on it. But you can see how that whole all these tubes and everything lead up to that spot, and where the strut comes up and the steering horn goes on to, and there you can see that's that Schrader valve and cap that we showed on there. So that's when it's installed, where you could service it. And for servicing, and that's there again, servicing is on the service and replenish fluids like that. And somebody goes, well, if I'm low, how do I know how much fluid? How do I get the fluid into that strut? Think about the best way to do this. That's not good. Boy, this might be difficult to do. I'm just going to bring this back. Okay, so you see there's not, this one is the air and fluid has been let out of it. So when it's on the airplane, you pull the valve stem out of there and we take a hose and a container of hydraulic fluid. So the hose is going into the container. I have a bottle here. Yes, I had it sitting here. Basically, it's like this stands here, and I have a little tube that goes down in the bottom of that. Tube comes out, and we just put it on top of the Schrader valve, outside in the just on the threads there. And then as you go up and down, you move the tire up and down, it will start drafting that fluid in. When you stop seeing air bubbles coming out of that plastic tube and it's pulled in all the fluid, then what you're going to do is you're going to push up on the tire. I'm just going to pull down on this and collapse the strut, just like that. Pull your tube off, put the valve back in, and now it's ready for 19. And so that's topping off basically the usable fluid inside these struts. I can't think of any manufacturer, but you can always double check on servicing with the manual on that. But for the most part, most of them are fluid level is fully collapsed. That's full. We find it very often that somebody decides that they're going to service it, and we go to open it, and fluid goes flying out of it everywhere because they circulate all the way up to, say, here. Well, what happens is there's not enough of, this is a hydraulic piston. You're going to have room and travel. You don't want it to hit hard, rock solid. This is meant to take, it's a shock absorber. And so you don't want to overfill the hydraulic fluid on it. And we find that, you don't know how, but a lot of times Dave and I are always taking a look and we see these things over service. And I don't know why. I don't know why. But you can look inside the manual. Manual explain to it, but sometimes it's a little hard to understand what you're talking about. But the idea is you want to have that strut fully collapsed on, especially on the Cessna and the Viper here. And then that's full. And then you put your valve stem back in. So that's just kind of a little idea. And you notice that if your plane's really bouncy, it just seems like it's floating on air, that means you probably need to have it serviced. And at that point, if it's been leaking out of there, that's the time you need to go in and have your mechanic go and change the seals up inside the struts. So that's a little bit on. The other thing I want to talk about is I do is I kind of put my back into my plane, and I just kind of just bounce it up and down and see where we're sitting on strut height, and how it will settle down. It'll give you an idea how it feels and how much air and how much fluid is in there. This one's quite good. It's sticking a little on the upper side right now. But here's the other thing that we'd like to take a look at, and that is, I think if your chrome areas, it's really good to take a little bit of the 5606, maybe have a spray bottle of it, put it in a rag, and wipe down the struts. You know, it just keeps all the, as you see, there's always going to be a film of the hydraulic fluid. That's what kind of coats and protects the seal as it's going. But then as you're flying along and going, you get a bunch of dirt and bugs and things, and they start building up. Well, those things wear and attack that little rubber seal. So I just go through and I have a little spray bottle of 5606, and I go and I have this for the line guys around here. Every morning they go through, and you know, you don't want to squirt it on it. You're going to make a mess. I always just take a little of my rag and just go in there and start cleaning and polish those bugs and that dirt off there. And the residue that you leave on there is perfect for, you can just feel it's a little bit greasy still. That's perfect. That keeps that strut. And then at this time, also look for any pitting or anything that, you know, just take your fingernail and scrape some of the stuff off, because as you come by there and quickly compress that strut, and you got a bunch of sticky bugs or, you know, dirt particles and stuff, that just abrades that seal. And, you know, that there's an expense in doing those seals. You know, I'd say on average, seals are not really expensive, but having your mechanic do it, you know, you probably got an hour and a half, 2 hours into each strut, you know, because you got to take off the trailing links and everything and readjust those. And it's another good thing too. And this is my personal preference for keeping your trailing link. Look at that. It's got good grease spots in there. You want all those joints greased, but you don't want a bunch of junk all over there. You want to see what's going on here. And so what I always like to do is, and I think it's a good, clean it however you want to, but a lot of times when I'm doing it on a Piper, to me, it's kind of simple because you have a little bit of cleaner right here in your valve. I call it Avgas, which is a very nice cleaner. So what I do is I'll just take my rag, maybe even when you're, you know, pre-flighting, and I'll just clean up, take a look, and just make sure everything's looking good in the trailing link. Make sure all the cotter pins and everything. You know, these things loosen up. The cotter pins break sometimes, and you know, if one of those cotter pins fell out and that screw came undone, this thing falls off, you're going to be landing without this landing gear. It's going to be in somebody's farm field. So I just always like to, on my pre-flight, you know, now when you got wheel pants, good luck. There's not much you can do. You know, you can take the wheel pan off and look at it, but it doesn't have wheel pants. I mean, I can get a mirror up and kind of look at some of that stuff and look at the brakes with a mirror. But yeah, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So then I would suggest periodically taking your wheel pan off and just inspecting it, you know, probably in between annuals, depending on how much you fly. That's my personal opinion on it. Because some people are, you know, if you're flying 2 hours a year in between annuals, then no, obviously not to do it. But if you're flying a lot, some of these things really should be looked at. And it's kind of hard on a pre-flight, you know, to do that if there's wheel pants on. So get comfortable pulling your wheel pant off. If you don't know how to do it the first time, swing it by your mechanic and say, well, can you show me how these wheel pants come off? It's not a super big deal to do it. It's just time consuming and putsy. You know, it's just screws and quarter turns and things like that. But you know, as you see, if they're covered up, it's really hard to do any inspection. We'll go over and look. I got wheel pants on mine. My airplane's sitting back there, so we'll show you how hard it's to see things. But yeah, look for general condition, just like we did on the Cessna. And then, which is really nice, if you don't have wheel pants, you can really clean these up. If you have the wheel pants on, you can't really do much with cleaning up the oleo strut. And then there again, same thing on that front. We saw the front, just keep that clean and look at that linkage back there on you know, similar style. It's just a wider metal framework that bolts in, but still 3 bolts, same thing. So let's go back and look at with wheel pants on, what we have to do with without wheel pants. How do we do about that?
135.
What is it?
135.
135. All right, we're going to show this, and then we're just going to see if there's anything else. We'll open up the questions and see if anybody has any questions. All right, as you see here, the wheel pan covers up a lot. It's really hard to see the condition of your tire. Very difficult to even check your tire pressures. One little trick that I like to do is, if you make a little mark on the sidewall of your tire, take like a one of those colored Sharpie, you know, you can get like a white Sharpie marker that's more like a paint stick Sharpie marker, and make a line on your tire that corresponds. So when it's straight down, it corresponds with where your valve is. So it hits your, you know, it hits within your door frame here. So line up, get it so you can get in there and get your tire gauge on there with your door, and then take your little marker and do a little paint strip on the sidewall of your tire. So then when you roll around your hanger, you'll see that little stripe down there. When you line that one up, you know, you can go in there and check your tire pressure. So that's one trick I've seen with wheel pants. And as you see, I mean, other than that, boy, it's really hard. You can kind of keep on rolling your tire and look at the sidewall and see if there's any flat spots. The other aspect is check for condition. How tight is it on there? You know, make sure that it's that. There's always a little bit of play in there, but make sure it's not falling off. And then over here on this side, remember, this is where our brake discs were. So you can take a flashlight and a mirror, and you can see up in there and see the caliper, the pads, and at least the bottom of the strut area, where if you see any leaking or getting kind of gooey there, prior to seeing a puddle down here. I mean, when it's a puddle, it's not preventative maintenance anymore. Now you're fixing it. So
you're actually missing a screw.
Yes, and here it is. I'm missing a screw in mine. But yeah, good example. You take a look at that. So that should be. But as you see, there's a little bit more involved in these. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws, or should be 7 screws there. A attachment here, which is just a nut, and then on the other side, I believe it's similar, about 7 screws, and then one on the outside. You take this inner one off, you can see a lot of the stuff without taking the outer one off. So it might be just a matter of taking this inner panel. That's most of the work, though. If you're there, a couple screws here and a bolt on the outside, you might want to just take it off and look at everything. But you can just pull the center off with basically 15 screws and one nut right there. These guys are a little tricky, because if you get your you could probably use a drill or something that to pull these off, but you'll need a shorty screwdriver on these, because you don't have much clearance. I mean, to get a screwdriver there, so you'll need to get a nice little stubby screwdriver of some sort to get under these. But that that pretty much covers it. With the landing gear wheel pant on, what you can do. So let's see. That's all I can think of right now. Of just kind of looking over and doing landing gear and checking it over. Obviously, there's various different landing gears and things, and Cirruses are a whole different, you know, there it's all fiberglass and it's a different, different inspection there, but you can just at least look at the wheel pants and yes. So I'd like to just open up if there's any questions that people have. Let's go over them. Any questions, Pete? Anybody have any?
No.
Okay. All right, well, if there's any other questions on anything else, anybody wanted to talk about today?
Person asked like what kind of jack you use to jack a plane.
Okay, yes, that's a good, very good question, very good question. Let's, first of all, we'll go and, yes. Let's go grab one of our jacks. I'm gonna grab a couple of jacks. This happens to be my jack. It's portable. It's some guy on the field gave it to me. I had to modify it a little bit for the height of my airplane by putting those blocks on there, but it's just basically a jack screw style jack here where you just turn that and it moves the jack up and down. Here's a hydraulic jack that we use on the wing style ones, and these come. You can order them with different size centers depending on the height of where your wing is. This gives you a starting point. And I'll show you where those go. And this is the standard car floor jack that we modified for the Cessnas. You can look online, ATS and some of these other places will have some small portable jacks and modified, especially for the Cessnas and things. But what we'll do is let's go roll this one over and I'll show you on the Piper where you'll find that jack point. And that jack point will be marked somewhere, and it'll also say in your POH and servicing, and usually you'll see this is what they look like. Sometimes there might be a tie down that you have to pull the tie down out and put a little adapter in there. So if you look in the POH, you'll see where it says the jack point, and usually they'll be marked. This happens to be the Pipers. They're always there. It's just that little conical spot, right? And generally you're going to see it on the wings right along the spar because that's where all the strength. That will go right in the top of the center of your jack. And there's a variety of jacks and heights and things. So you just have to kind of know how does your airplane sit. This one uses, we use this one in the Cherokee size because that's perfect. They have a shorter one, but it doesn't quite have the reach. So, and then I'll show you. We made our own fitting, machined out our own fitting for this floor jack. So if you get down over here on the, especially on the restart Cessnas, you'll see this little nipple thing right there on the actual tubular strut. It's just a little thing right there. That's the jack point there. So what we did is we made an adapter to a regular floor jack that goes right up and a little receptacle for it. Right like that. Goes right into there and holds it. This piece comes out and you have your flat plate. Sometimes we use the flat plate on some things, but and generally we'll use this one. And then on a Cessna, sometimes they have the steel spring style. They either have a spot on there, or you can order up a little block from some of these places, that little wedge that comes up that you can attach your jack to. So that's it. So it depends on, take a look and see what it shows. A lot of times there'll be that servicing section in your POH that will show what to do. And then you can go online, different manufacturers, Chief, ATS, Aircraft Spruce, they'll carry something. You can get a little bottle jack for the Cessnas. The reason we like these versus a bottle jack gets very tippy. If you could maybe mount it to a board or something, it gets very tippy. When I jack this up, I like, and it moves around some, and these are on wheels. It just kind of moves around, and it's very stable, never going to fall, tip over. And that's why I really like the modification we did here with a good sized car floor jack. So get a little nervous. We used to jack them up with a bottle jack, and I don't know. Worst thing you can do is have something up on jacks and then drop it. That would not be good. So, and that's the other thing too. If you have it up for a while as you're working on your tire, might not be a bad idea to block up by the axle some pieces of wood so that it can't really come down very far if the jack happens to tip over. Because it tips over and you're down there, it's very hard on your axle, and not to mention very difficult then to get a jack back under it again. So yeah, any other questions?
How much strut fluid do you like? How much strut fluid?
Well, that there again, you don't know. You're filling it to that collapsed state. So how much is that? If I were to actually see what the amount is, depending on a typical, it's not much. I would say maybe
8 ounces.
Yeah, half a pint might be in there, but you can't just rely on that, because what you're doing is you're filling it in relationship to a condition of how you have that strut sitting. So when you're pumping the strut up and down, you're pulling it down, it's drafting that fluid in through the tube. You're bleeding out the air, you're watching the fluid come out and the air come out. And when you get it so it's solid coming out of that tube, when you go all the way up to the top is where you're done. Fully collapsed is the amount of fluid that strut wants. But yeah, there's no way of really accurately getting it. I suppose if someone actually sat there and said, I'm going to pull that valve off and try to pour it in with a funnel, and you just don't do it that way. You just don't. Like you want to utilize that and pump that fluid in, get that hydraulic fluid moving and get that air out. And that's the main thing, getting the air out into your thing, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be putting nitrogen in it. You don't want air. Air holds moisture and is more corrosive. Nitrogen is why we use that. It's more stable and it's less corrosive. So that's the only way to get that air out of there, is to pump the fluid in and out. And as you're moving the air out, it goes back into your container that you're drawing from, and goes back to the atmosphere, and it's out of your strut. So, all right, any other questions? All right, well, sounds good. Thanks for coming and having another preventative maintenance talk. Maybe someday we'll be able to get this back off of Zoom and actually have it live. I missed the live where I can actually point, touch, and show things. But thanks for coming out and watching, and we'll see you next month.